So how do you think pharmaceutical companies and supplement brands shape the aging conversation in ways that might be more harmful than helpful?
Again, I think they underscore the idea that aging is a disease, and they also kind of underscore the whole biohacking process, that we can just fix the problem. Western medicine, pharmaceutical companies, supplements all think that we have a problem to fix, and that by treating the symptoms of aging, we're fixing the problem. And when aging is not a problem to solve, it's a process that we need to just focus on doing better. And I think the pharmaceutical companies are all about not making us well, but keeping us just sick enough that they can keep providing us with their product. And I think it was Dr. Lupkin, when we interviewed him, that he pointed out that medicine never cures anything. All it does is treat the symptoms. And, it's about lifestyle changes. And I know the supplement brands will say, well, taking the supplements is a lifestyle. But is it really? Because you're supplementing, you're not, it's filling a void that you're not filling through natural nutrition, exercise, good sleep, and all those types of things. And I'm not knocking. There are supplements that I think are useful, especially as our environments make it a little bit harder to age well. But there's a difference between selling something that is helping to promote our health versus basically selling snake oil that is intended to mask a problem or convince us that we're reversing the problem.
I also think that supplements have a benefit in the fact that, yes, we are supplementing, but a lot of people aren't getting the proper nutrition or the proper whatever that they need. But I also think when a supplement becomes too awesome and starts really cutting back on a lot of symptoms, I think Big Pharma comes in and kind of dilutes the supplement per se, because let's see, ashwagandha, for example. Ashwagandha, a few years ago, no one had really heard of it. And those that had heard of it, when they would take it, it would help a lot, help regulate hormone levels. It would help do all these things. And then all of a sudden, ashwagandha blew up and it became really popular. And now it's almost like you take it, it's a completely different supplement than what it once was. And it's almost like a placebo effect. It's almost like, this isn't the same. It's not the same. Same with apple cider vinegar. I mean, even apple cider vinegar, what it used to look like in stores was thick and it had that the pulp inside of it, and it was brown. And now it's almost like pea yellow, very clear. And it's a completely different supplement altogether. I think when supplements are a threat to Big Pharma and they are a threat to start working, I think something crazy happens. Or maybe they're just mass producing it too much and it's losing its potency.
I think that's more the issue. I don't think there's like a big conspiracy for because pharmaceutical companies, they're not buying up the supplement companies and kind of watering down the brands. They're more concerned with trying to convince people that the supplements don't work, that they have to take the medications, that give you a whole boatload of side effects. But I think what's happening in the supplement industry is when something does get identified as being somewhat beneficial, and they're either ramping up the dosage, ours is more powerful, more potent, and we have more of this in it, and they're selling you, again, just more snake oil, or they are just putting the least quality product they can in the bottle, and you're just convinced that it's good stuff, and so you're taking it. And so it's really hard to trust the supplement industry. And there are companies, again, that are doing it well. And I think it behooves us as consumers to do our research in the product that we're actually buying and the supplement that we're taking. I was listening to a podcast yesterday that a nutritionist was talking about melatonin and how we keep pushing melatonin. Well, melatonin, according to this individual, only adds about 3 minutes to our sleep. And yet it's the top rate, it's the top supplement that somebody's going to take if they're having difficulty sleeping.
But it's also something our body naturally produces.
Right. And the dosages that they're putting into these supplements are magnitude more than what our body naturally produces in order to cause us to sleep.
So let me ask you this, though. Could that affect testosterone is another thing. If people start doing testosterone replacement therapy or wanting to inject testosterone in, eventually their body says, okay, this is too much. I don't want to produce anymore. Could it be the exact same thing with melatonin, where they're taking a melatonin supplement and then their body's like, okay, this is too much. I don't want to produce anymore.
Possibly, particularly in the younger population. As we age, we do see declines in melatonin. And so it could be beneficial for an aging individual to take some melatonin. They only need a small amount. And the thing that we have to consider with melatonin is it doesn't help us sleep. It helps us get to sleep. It just tells our body, okay, it's time to go to bed, time to sleep. And so it's going to trigger us falling asleep, but it's not going to necessarily keep us asleep. I think it was Dr. Neustadt that pointed out that it has like a couple hour half-life to it, that it's only going to do its trick for the initial hours of sleep, get you to sleep, but we still need to stay asleep in order for our sleep to be effective. And so, if you're traveling a lot back and forth between time zones, or you are aging and you're having trouble just falling asleep, small doses of melatonin can be beneficial. The bigger the dose, the more you're just peeing it out. So it's not as beneficial for you. And you mentioned testosterone therapy. I think, individuals who are taking testosterone replacement therapy are taking it because their testosterone levels aren't optimized. And so they're not producing enough. And so it's not a matter of it shutting down our natural hormonal processes. It's trying to replace the fact that we are seeing a decline. Now, the first thing, of course, you should be looking at is there something physiologically that's causing me not to produce testosterone optimally, and trying to fix that problem rather than just taking the supplement or taking testosterone, taking the hormone. But, as we age, we do expect that to decline. And so if we're seeing physiological challenges with that, then there's probably not a huge issue with an older aging individual taking testosterone in order to optimize. But if you're a young 20-year-old and you're taking testosterone when your body is still producing it at a significant rate,
right?
Yeah, you're going to be damaging your own processes, being able to continue to produce your own testosterone. And so if you're not producing enough testosterone when you're younger, then what can we do to boost that natural production so that the body's continuing to make it? When somebody takes exogenous testosterone, steroids, I mean, testosterone's a steroid. I don't know why we think of steroids being the nasty stuff, but then if you're taking it for aging, you are taking it for therapy reasons. And so it's replacement therapy instead of, doing steroids. But if you're taking it young, it can have a much more damaging effect. When you get older and you're doing it to optimize, I think it's more of a personal choice. It can be, expensive. So, it's really up to you in that regard. But I don't think it's quite the same as, taking melatonin when our body is still naturally producing it, maybe not quite as much, but we're taking huge mega doses of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I think it's also certain people, they need to, their bodies are going to have a different reaction, right? Caffeine is a great example. If I take in caffeine and you take in caffeine and it's the same milligrams, our bodies are going to have two different reactions. You might be able to completely handle it because you have a higher tolerance to caffeine, and I might be bouncing off the walls because even though it was the exact same amount and you're physically showing minimal effects, my body's not able to handle that. So if someone is going to be experimenting with supplements, then they gotta know the effects and what it's going to do with your body, but also, I would say kind of play around with it. We had a gentleman on this podcast who was talking about the benefits of magnesium. And at first we were kind of like, oh man, I don't know. I didn't feel anything. And currently I've kind of played around with magnesium, and I kind of have it down on what works for me. I take my magnesium trisinate in the mornings, and then I take right around lunchtime, I take an omega-3 fish oil. And then at nighttime, I take magnesium glycinate combined with NAC. And that combination, I just feel way more energetic throughout the day. I feel way more alert. I feel way more focused. And just that combination, I was like, this is a really good combination. And I'm physically feeling these awesome effects, and it's been months, and I'm like, okay, I figured it out, but it took me a while to do that.
Yeah. And I think the key with supplements is, are you trying to fix a problem, or are you just trying to manage your natural physiology? And there's a big difference in there. And the key is, if we're going to use supplements, they should be to augment our natural physiology as opposed to try and fix a problem that could be solved through something else, like getting enough sleep, getting enough exercise, eating some different foods, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I do have a question for you. I've noticed that on our last few episodes, you really emphasized when you say the Aging Well podcast, you really like drive it in with the "the." What's the importance of the "the"?
Well, I think we really pushed that in kind of the first episode of this season 4, but there are a number, and I'm seeing Aging Well appear a lot more. And I'm kind of somewhat hopeful that maybe it's because people are kind of seeing this podcast and kind of catching on to the phrasing. But there are a number of different podcasts that are out there. But when I look at them, it's like it's more like, what's it like to be getting old, and, maybe countering ageism and some of that kind of stuff. But I want to emphasize that this is the Aging Well podcast, that this is where people should come if they want to get information that's going to help them to live with vitality, to increase their health span, increase their well span, and, be better in life, living as well as possible, living longer, but also living better. And so this is the Aging Well podcast. So the other ones, they're good podcasts, and you might see people talk about things to do to age well. But I want this to be the resource where people are going to come for information about how to age well.
Right. We should probably just give this opportunity right now. If there's anyone who, believes in our 6 pillars, I think that would be a really cool thing. So if you're a nutritionist, if you're a sleep hygienist, if you're, we'll just start promoting it. Just come on. We'd love to interview with you. We'd love to talk with you. We'd love to share your knowledge. If you're a subject matter expert, if you're a doctor, if you're, if you have the knowledge, if you have some breakthrough stuff, come on in. We'd love to chat with you.
Now, I would emphasize, when we are looking for guests, we want those guests who are looking at the preventative side of medicine and aging well. We're not looking at being reactive. We're not looking at biohacking. And God help me if I have one more guest request for somebody with, male enhancement. I mean, that is not about aging well. So yeah, our topics are going to be centered on, and they are centered on, people who are great examples of aging well, people who have information that are going to help us to age well, and also people that are going to help us through some of the challenges that might come with, the difficulties that come with aging. We will have illness. We will have, older parents maybe that are declining and need assistance. And we want to help kind of provide direction toward that. But our goal is to get everybody living to be 120 and living with vitality and living with purpose and living out the spies and living out those pillars and just aging the heck out of life.
Right. I think I figured it out why those other Aging Well podcasts aren't necessarily they're not going to be the Aging Well podcast, right?
They don't have us.
They don't have great personalities on the microphone. And then two, I think a lot of them are just focusing on the diet and exercise portion. And because I think a lot of people are just associating diet and exercise when it comes to aging well. But why is that model so outdated?
I don't know that it's outdated. I think it's more that it is inadequate.
Okay.
And we started this podcast with much more of a diet exercise perspective. I mean,
Well, it's because that's what
exercise
we know.
science. Yeah. But, and I brought into it, a little bit of my well-centered fitness. That was a small component of the start of this podcast, thinking of the spiritual, physical, intellectual, and emotional. Shout out to Jay. Again, he's going to start asking for royalties every time we point out that he's the one who identified the SPIES acronym. But, there's more to aging than just the exercise and the diet. And, we started with 4 pillars. That I've identified from teaching pathophysiology and exercise. It was the, exercise and physical activity, eat a healthy diet, maintain a healthy body composition, and don't smoke. And we've talked recently about, how fewer and fewer people are smoking. So that's a little bit less maybe of a concern. But where we have really leaned into a little bit more is sleep hygiene and purposeful social connections and the importance of those things. And it's all of those factors, whether we label them as 6 pillars or, others will, kind of label them at 4. And I'm kind of drawing a blank right now on how Matt Caberline labels his. And he just it's like, I forget how it goes. It's like move, eat, sleep, and connect, I think is how he does it. Which, it's basically shaping the same, it's just another way of painting the same picture. But there's more than just the exercise. And I think, we've recognized too that sleep, as hard as it is to say as an exercise physiologist, is probably more important than exercise when it comes to aging well. Because if we don't get enough sleep, our hormones get out of order, our ability to manage blood glucose levels, manage stress, function in our jobs, function in our relationships, to be able to recover from exercise and to be able to exercise is all going to be affected by that lack of sleep. And so getting adequate sleep really becomes a major priority. But of course, we got to still exercise. We still have to look at our diets and we still have to not smoke. And, we want to be interacting with people socially. And so all those things are important. And so it's not that the model is outdated. I think it's just a limited model.
Gotcha.